Welcome to Phillip Island, Victoria in Australia. What a setting we have for this great sporting contest, the Little Penguin Sea to Dune race. Nervous moments always as they gather on the beach, the tension mounting, and away they go. There's the defending champion, wearing his familiar navy blue and white, great waddling style. Another pre-race favourite though, losing touch with the pack. Maybe that's why. A few too many fish in the day's feeding. There's a familiar face, Skip McIntyre, 8 times a champion back in the 90s, a very successful coach now, keeping a keen eye on proceedings. This the leading group, 1 or 2 still able to put on a show for the camera, others just ploughing straight over it. Some resorting to shortcuts. Sad that cheating has crept into this beautiful sport. The judges will have a look at that. But up at the front, the pace is relentless, closing in on those sand dunes that will offer a bed for the night. The fatigue starting to tell. Who's got the finishing kick up on the outside? What a turn of pace from that one, whichever one it is. No answer from the rest, and he takes victory. What a win. There we are, into the Burrow, building an extension with his winnings, and back tomorrow to try and defend his title here on Phillip Island.
Hello and welcome to Penguin Live TV, everybody, where we are going to talk to you about anything and everything penguin, goose, bandicoot and Phillip Island related. My name is Ranger Viv and we have got Ranger Tom with us. Come on in and let us know what you're going to be up to tonight.
Hi everyone, I'll be keeping an eye on the Facebook feed, and so any interesting questions we'll try and pass through. We do get a lot, so keeping them interesting and relevant, and we'll try to get as to many as we can. If not, try again tomorrow night, and have a great night.
Thanks, Tom, and we'll get you all to put in your guesses for how many penguins came in last night. You've got a couple of minutes and I'll let Tom come back in here and let us know the answer. Now, you're going to have to bear with us tonight. Our cameras were cleaned by our counters, Kat and Kerry, but we've had some drizzle, so they've already started to come up a bit funky again. And as we've got a medium low tide, it's going to be just a little bit harder. And here are penguins already. So while you're putting in your guesses for last night, put in your guesses for how many are here. Now, we are streaming to you from Phillip Island, which is also known as Malau, which is the traditional name given to Phillip Island by the Bunurong people, who are the traditional landowners here on Phillip Island and much of Bast Coast going towards Melbourne. And they had lived here for thousands and thousands of years before European settlement. They would come through and travel seasonally through Phillip Island when the shearwaters were here as a really abundant food source for them. And without the care that they took of their land, we wouldn't have the penguins and the beautiful island in the state that we have it today. So I would like to acknowledge that this is their land that we are on and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Now, Tom, did you have the numbers for last night?
It was 1,086.
1,086. What a good night. And to think just last week we were having only 400 or 500 a night. So it's nice to see those numbers come up. Hopefully this is the true beginning of our breeding season. We'll have to see how we go. We've also been having a lot of shell gritters lately, so I'm going to come back to that in a bit, but also a very promising sign that we're having a successful start to breeding. Well, I don't know if it's successful or just a start yet. We'll have to see what our research team has to say about that. Now, when I say we, which I say a lot, I'm talking about Phillip Island Nature Parks. And so we are a non-for-profit organisation who looks after the penguins, but we also look after about 20% of Phillip Island. So not just our beautiful little penguins here tonight, but we've also got the seal colony off past the Nobbies. We've got the koalas all around the island. We have got Churchill Island, which was the first home to the bandicoots with part of our breeding program and release there. Basically about 20% of the island we manage and look after, which has not just benefits to our very cute animals that we pay a lot of attention to here, but also some of your more common wildlife that might be a little bit less exciting. I disagree with that very wholeheartedly. I think our wallabies and our geese and our swamp hens are very exciting, funny little creatures. Now, these penguins are known as the little penguins, Eutalipt minor, which means good little diver. So they are the smallest species of penguin, and I really want to see them try to jump over this little seaweed pile here because they're just so clumsy and ridiculous. Being such a small penguin, they are much more prone to predation than a lot of the bigger penguins that you'd see in documentaries and things like that. So they are crossing the beach in sunset because that is when their main predators have gone to bed for the night. So any big birds of prey like eagles and hawks and Pacific gulls, they should all have left the beach to go to sleep for tonight, which means the penguins have a much safer journey across the beach. But they've crossed in these large numbers, which we call a raft when they're in the water because of that safety in numbers. Because there is a chance that some predators have decided to stay up past their bedtime, as we all like to do every now and again. So the penguins want to be absolutely sure that the risk of predation is really, really low. As you can see, it's a lot harder to see the penguins on these rocks now that they're home, as well as when they were in the water. They just sort of appear on the very edge for us. So they're really exposed while they're on the beach. So these big groups provide them with a lot of protection. Now, I very briefly mentioned raft, so I want to explain the word huck for any people who aren't so regular on our live streams. Huck is, it's the name of one of their calls. A penguin makes a hucking sound when they're in the water because they need to form these groups somehow. They don't just suddenly meet up at the pub and they're finally here and ready to go home. They've got to join together, and they all make this hucking sound, which goes a bit like a huck, 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 huck. And they all converge on the sound of that huck and form these groups or rafts. And they might form a big raft and then all split up to form smaller rafts to go different directions, or they might do the opposite. They might have a lot of smaller rafts before they get home. Now, I believe Tom just found out the number for this first big group that came home. What was that for us, Tom?
165.
165. That is an excellent start to our parade tonight. Love to see it. And that is, already almost half of what we were having just a week ago. So that is beautiful. And you can see that even though we've had some drizzle, our pond isn't here tonight. We've got a little tiny bit of remnant from our little, the little pond that the creek has come through. But we haven't got the whole thing. But look at these penguins. Holy moly. Look at them running and tripping over each other. You just cannot get enough of these little guys. Okay, now I hope everyone's getting their questions in because I really do love questions. Hard ones, easy ones, weird ones, less weird one. It's all good fun to us. Because it gives us something else to talk about instead of just rambling all night long, which, I mean, I'm happy to do that regardless, but it's always good. So while we're on that, have we had any cool questions yet, Tom?
A little bit of a different one from Paul. The question was how many people work on the island. I'm assuming he's talking about the nature park. So we've got over 200 staff, scientists, researchers, environment, education, ticketing, retail, the list goes on. So it's quite a large organisation, and that's all paid usually through visitation over the last 20 odd years. We have 10,000 people that live on the island, permanents, but on a really busy weekend, not COVID times obviously, but other busy times, we can have over 100,000 people on the island. So we always say the island sinks a few centimetres on a busy weekend and then it bobs up again when everyone leaves.
That's it. I wonder if the island sinking affects the tides and the penguins at all. Could you imagine? Thanks, Tom. That's great. Yeah, so we are visitor funded, which makes for a bit of hard times for us here at the moment without being able to see all your beautiful faces hanging out with us every single day viewing the penguins in person. We are giving you the live streams instead, which is a lot of fun for us, and we hope you guys are enjoying it just as much as we are. I know personally, I'm really happy to have an excuse to leave the house and do my job, even if it's a little bit different to how I usually do it. But if you are interested in helping us out and you can't come in anytime soon, you know, without thinking about lockdowns at all, if you're interstate or in a different country, but still would like to be a part of helping us and helping our conservation work, our education and research, you can adopt a penguin, you can make a donation, and all of that can be found through the link in the description through the Penguin Foundation, which is our charity organisation. But there's also a lot of other things you can do to help penguins, which are a little bit less direct, and it'll help not just penguins. So say you live in the UK or the US, very far away from penguins, you can still help out your ocean wildlife just by being a little bit more careful about what you use in your day-to-day life. So like I've got my handy penguin water bottle here instead of using plastic water bottles. I know I see in the comments every now and again people keeping metal straws in their car. I do too, since I'm very prone to a cheeky Macca's trip on the way to work. I've got my metal straws there to make sure I'm not using any plastic straws. So if you've got any other tips, I'm always keen to learn other ways that I could possibly help reduce my plastic. So let us know in the comments and I'll have a look through later on, see if I've got any ideas. But all the plastic reduction is going to mean there's going to be less plastic going into the ocean. All of this lightweight plastic, even if you do the right thing and put it in the bins, it easily can get blown out of the bins, taken out of the bins by cheeky birds. Cockatoos and ravens are very good at pinching things out of your bins, which can have it lead to our sewer systems and then back to the ocean. So even if you're doing the right thing and putting it in the bin, it can still end up in our waterways. So reduction is your best bet where you can. Obviously, there are some things that you won't be able to reduce your plastic, and just trying to make sure it's going in the bin in a way that is not going to end up in the ocean as much as possible. Now, these penguins are leaving the safety of the rocks here, which means it's going to take them a little bit longer to do their little sprint. They want to sort of look both ways before they cross the beach, make sure there's no cheeky predators hanging around still, no shadows, no silly Bruce the Goose hanging about going to upset them. And then once they start to get a little bit closer, they're going to do their little sprint home. You can see the first ones are starting. Oh, the camera is really not agreeing with us tonight. And they're going to do their little sprint because, well, there's no going back to the water now. They're almost here. They might as well go for it and run. And this is the point where it's much easier for Kerry to count these penguins as they start to spread across. So for anyone who might be their first night or early days joining us tonight, we count these penguins every single night. And we have been doing that since about 1968. And this can give us a lot of valuable information, such as when they're getting ready to breed or when they're leaving the breeding season and heading towards winter, just by watching the general penguin numbers drop or raise throughout the year. So as our penguin numbers have been going up again, as well as seeing the shell gritters, we are thinking that they are finally starting to properly breed. We hope, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. We've been seeing a lot of shell gritters. So if you see in our highway camera above me, any penguins going the wrong way, in all likelihood that is a shell gritter. A shell gritter is a female penguin who is a couple of days to maybe 5 days away from laying her egg. She has very selflessly given her calcium from her own body to the egg to form the hard shell, and then she's become a little bit calcium deficient herself. So she's going to go back to the beach to eat some little tiny bits of shell pieces so she can restore her calcium levels to keep herself nice and healthy, not heavy, maybe. So watching shell gritters and seeing the numbers increase is a really, really good sign that our penguins are hopefully starting
Sorry, I missed that one. What was the
to
number?
breed. And it looks like we're getting another number, I hope.
She said 223, I think.
Ooh, 223 for that next group. That's a good one. Ooh, what are they running
That's what she
from?
said.
We think she said 223. The reception here for our radio is pretty terrible, so every now and again we don't quite get the correct number. Oh, they were running. I thought Bruce might be back. I love Bruce. What are these penguins doing? All right, let's get distracted. Tom, while I'm distracted, do you have any more questions for us?
Yep, this is from
Distracted by bush.
Fran and Dom in the UK. How do the little penguins learn to fish, and do the parent penguins teach them? So I'm not sure about the other species, but with these penguins, what happens is the adults actually, when the chicks are ready to leave home, the parents will actually stay in the ocean. Their job's done. And eventually, after a couple of days, between instinct and hunger, the chicks will start going out in the ocean. They'll follow other penguins. And so the parents don't teach them how to swim or feed. It's all done through instinct and maybe following other penguins, but certainly not from the parents.
That's right. These penguins, although they're lucky to be very well looked after by both of their parents, they will take turns. One parent will feed them and one will keep them warm and safe while the other gets food. And then they're going to swap every day or every couple of days, depending on what their food needs are at that age. But once they hit between 8 to 11 weeks, they're out. They go to the ocean for the first time and that's it. They are a fully fledged penguin and they have got to figure it all out themselves, which is why penguins do have a really tricky first year of life. Now, we like to keep it real here at the Penguin Parade. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, although it's not at all sunshines and rainbows since we're here at night. We've got a shell gritter coming up already. Brilliant. So I'm going to stay here looking at penguin bums as well. So the first year of a penguin chick's life after they fledge is they have a bit of a gap here where they learn all of their skills. They learn how to fish, where to fish, and how to find their way home again. And that's really important in the survival of them. And so what that means as well is it means that they don't all have a really good and healthy first year. So we actually have found that only about around 15% of penguins will survive that first year. So we do often have a really hard time just after they start to fledge, where we'll find penguins washing up on beaches and everyone starts to get really nervous. Oh, his shell gritter's going to get run over by a group. Where that we do end up with a lot of penguins washing up on beaches, and it's really sad and distressing, obviously, for anyone walking these beaches. But it is a completely normal part of their cycle. These penguins, at least here on Phillip Island, they're not threatened. In general, they are least concern on the ICUN red list. I always get that acronym mixed up, which is sort of the international list of whether we decide an animal is fine, doing great, whether they're endangered, critically endangered, or extinct. Oh, I'm losing the shell gritter here. Let's have a look, see if we can get it back this side. And so penguins are least concern. There are some specific colonies that are under threat because of foxes or human. Where is she going? She's like, no, I'm not letting you look at me. But these guys, especially here on Phillip Island, are not really having too much trouble. We have done everything that we can to help them on land by removing foxes and removing the housing estate that was in the middle of their colony. And from then, we've had penguin numbers go from about 12,000 in the 80s to 32,000 now. And we've been sitting at 32,000 reliably for the past sort of 4 or 5 years. And we're hoping to see numbers go up. But at the moment, we're pretty happy with how these little penguins are doing. But in saying that, they don't have no threats without the foxes. They've still got a lot of threats while they're in the water. And when they're in the water, it is a lot harder for us to control those threats. So things like their food source and climate change are a big one of things that we can't sort of as an individual do a whole lot about. Like as an individual, we can choose to avoid foods with pilchards and anchovies because that is their absolute favourite food. And if we don't buy too much of it, we're less likely to be taking the food from the penguins. But as a whole, it's more looking at sort of the laws and legislation to being able to help protect our penguins and to protect a lot of our ocean friends. And that is something that through Nature Parks we're doing the best to push to do what we can at changing those where possible and making a difference there. But it's really hard to protect animals once they're in the water because it's not always our water that we're looking at here. We can only protect their homes. Now here we go. Has the shell gritter come back out yet? Kerry was 5 minutes. Oh, that was quick. Kerry was saying that last night she had a shell gritter that kept coming out and like leaving these rocks here and then meeting them halfway across the beach and then joining the group and doing that over and over again, which would have interfered with her count quite a bit. So I think, lucky for us, Kerry's a master penguin counter. She's been doing it for a long time. It probably didn't bother her too much, but I know if I was counting the penguins and a shell gritter kept coming and going, I would have I would have messed up my count a little bit for sure. It's always a bit trickier when you have them going in and out. What are you guys doing? Every time I see penguins stopping, I'm like, please be a goose. I would love to see my own little goose gate. Is that terrible? Maybe? Not sure. But what are you doing? Why are they going around when there's no goose? Penguins are weird animals. They do what they want. You know, we say that they do this because this is what logic states and this is what a long history of research states, but there are always exceptions to the rule, and they seem to like to show their face to me just to really mess me around sometimes. Let's have a watch of these penguins going up the hill. They're gonna join their buddies now. Maybe the goose is here, but he keeps running off every time I try to look at him. He's like, I'm camera shy tonight, guys. You do not get to play with me. How are we going for questions, Tom?
One more.
One more? Brilliant.
This is from Evie, who's 5 years old. How far do the little penguins travel in one day? So they could potentially swim up to about 30 to 50 kilometres in a day, which is quite a long way. So with a lot of school groups I've done over the years, I often ask the kids to imagine where a place that they know, like the city or the next town, and use that as a measure. Or maybe if you're going for a drive with the kids, you can say, oh, this is when the penguins start swimming, and when you get to the 30 to 50 kilometres, you can say when they stop swimming. But obviously with lockdowns, that's a bit hard to do some places, so I wouldn't recommend that. But while they're doing that, they're actually diving about 800 to 1,000 times a day, up to 50, 60, 70 metres. So they're not just swimming in a flat distance, they're doing a hell of a lot while they're doing that as well.
That's it. So as Tom said, that even though it is, you know, sort of an average 20 or 30 kilometres, it might not be from sort of 20 to 50 kilometres. It might not be from point A to point B. It might be a very short distance, but a lot of up and down. The same with some of these penguins might have to travel 2 kilometres home. Might not necessarily be 2 kilometres from the beach to here, but once you go over these hills, it can end up being 2 kilometres. And could you just imagine being a tiny penguin with these tiny legs? Your knees don't bend, but not only that, your knees also up in your belly, like near your belly button. Having to, I can't keep up with it now. Having to walk up to 2 kilometres home, and you know, they can go up pretty steep hills while they're at it too. It is hard work. Like, I'm always impressed at penguins because yes, they take lots of rest breaks, but if I was a penguin, I'd be taking a lot more rest breaks. They are very well adapted to what they need to do, especially in the water, but they are still extremely good at doing what they need to on land, even if they're clumsy and look ridiculous while they do it. They do get home, they do figure it out. And in that, not only are they doing that, but they also have to pay really close attention to where they're going. Penguins go to the same home every time they're coming back to land. So they've got excellent memories to be able to do that. They're looking at landmarks, whether that be us here at our building, at our stands, or whether it's a certain rock or a certain road or a penguin version of a road. So, ooh, what's that? Am I seeing things? Oh, here's a big raft. All right, let's look at that instead of, I don't know, whatever that blur was that I was looking at. So they've got their own little road system. So we've got the highway, which is the main road that we can see across the camera above me. And then we've got like the other road going up the hill, the one that follows the creek going sort of to the left that we'll see in a minute. And the penguins are able to use these roads as a way to figure out how they're going to get home and which way they need to go. And so quite often they look lost. We get asked all the time, is that penguin okay? Is he lost? But no, more often than not, they're just having a look going, where is my landmark? And they always figure it out. They always figure out where they're going. I mean, it'll be hard to be sure if a penguin's gotten lost or not, but I've never seen a penguin that I personally believed was truly lost. They've always just been having a look around, having a bit of a rest, and then they head on their way with their ridiculous amount of confidence going, yes, I'm going up here because this is the way that I go home. I don't look like that when I'm going home, that's for sure. Now, Tom gave me 5 minutes and I did not look at the time, so it could have been 12 minutes by now. It could have been a little bit less, so I'm going to maybe take a few more questions and then get ready.
About 6 minutes ago.
About 6 minutes ago, yeah, see? I know roughly how long 5 minutes is. How about that, Tom? Have we got any more questions and we'll get ready to head off?
There was one from Alice, which I actually asked answering the last question about how deep they dive. I included that in the last one. This is from Simone. Do different penguins fight with each other over food and territory? So this is as far as species I was talking about. So in Australia, we've only got the one species, the little penguin. In New Zealand, they've got 3 different species. They've got the crested fiordland, the little blues, which is what we've got here, the little penguins, and the yellow-eyed, but the yellow-eyes are the most threatened species in the world, so they don't really sort of overlap. As a general rule, the further south you get, the bigger the penguins get, and that's why your emperor penguins and king penguins and those are down south in Antarctica. Our guys wouldn't survive there. So there's some places like South America you might get a bit of overlap with species, but in most countries there's only one. So in South Africa and Australia.
Yeah, very good point. But in saying that, as much as the penguins aren't going to fight with other species of penguins, which is good because our penguins, I'm sure, would lose most of those fights based on size alone, is we will have penguins have a little bit of territorial spats among themselves. I don't know if they compete over food in the ocean. They tend to be solitary when they're out fishing, although recent research has shown that they do sometimes fish in groups, but we think that might be more of a coincidence than them actively going together. But during the breeding season especially, they can be a little bit feisty and defensive of their home more than anything. So it's not so much here, but most of the time when we've got boxes, we used to put them in fours. So we'd have, 4 boxes all back to back in a bit of a circle, square. But we found that every single time, only 3 of those boxes would be occupied. So they didn't like to be too close to each other, but they enjoy being close enough. So we found putting them in 3s instead made a huge difference to not wasting resources. So all the boxes would get used and we wouldn't have one box sitting there just looking pretty. So they can be a little bit like, they're very good in their community. They help each other preen. They obviously swim in their rafts and use each other for protection, but they don't like to be too close. So they're sort of socially antisocial, if you can think about that. That was the wrong button. I can relate to that because sometimes I really like being around people and other times I'm like, you know what? I just want to sit behind a computer and talk to penguins while I'm not actually having to interact with many people. So one of the little benefits we've got here, I suppose. Now, as we know, we're very good at going overtime here, but Tom has already said I've gone overtime. So I'm going to go back to the beach, look for a raft, hopefully coming in. Let's press the right button will help. And then we'll get ready to say goodbye. So let's have a look. Oh, here we go. Here's a nice blurry raft. Let's see if you want to work with me tonight, guys. So this might seem weird, but it's genuinely, this is pretty... Oh, see, no, here's the shell gritter. Sorry, Tom. Can't help myself. I reckon this is probably the same one as last night. They kept coming out, meeting the group of penguins coming in and then following them in. So poor Kerry's having to make sure, if that group has actually 27, maybe it's only 26 because it's a shell gritter coming and going. So she's having to pay very close attention while also watching another 3 penguin pathways on the way. So Kerry's doing an excellent job tonight at penguin counting, especially as the numbers go up and it starts to get even harder. But I think we will leave it at that tonight. So if you ask some questions and you've got a burning question that we weren't able to answer tonight, ask us again tomorrow. We do our best to ask a whole range of questions from a whole range of different people. So we're definitely not, specifically asking certain questions. We definitely don't ignore the hard questions. We love a question where we say, I don't know. Sometimes it can be really exciting to be like, I actually have no idea. That sounds like a fun little project. So I know Tom doesn't like to do the huck off, but he can still come in and wave with us, and I am going to make a fool by myself, which is always a little bit different than when I have Jordan or Megan hucking with me. But thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I hope you will join us again tomorrow night at again the same time, and we will see you then. Goodbye.
Good night.